The illustrious Jabba bids you welcome. I'm going to regret this.
I'm Pete Mitchell. He's Peyton Jones. And this is the Church Planter Podcast, brought to you by Church Planter Magazine. Hey, Church Planter, this is Pete Mitchell.
And this is Peyton Jones.
What is thy bidding, my master?
Wipe them out.
And you are listening to the Church Planter Podcast, the only podcast with Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones. In fact, we would never give up this podcast, ever. This is our baby.
You know, they can have this podcast when they pry it from my cold, dead fingers.
Don't say that. Don't say that. You'll be dead within 6 weeks.
Hey, I got a threatening email yesterday from a false prophet.
Oh, nice. What'd he say?
I was wondering when will my celebrityism hit? Because, you know, I have no celebrity. I'm like it's laughable. Like the amount of micro celebrity I have is so small that, I don't know, I'd pick another small celebrity and say, you know, he'd fart my celebrity out. You know, it's not impressive, not big. But, you know, it's funny because I got this, it was basically that I mix pop culture with the things of God. And therefore, God is coming to destroy me because I have been warned before.
Oh,
yes, and bad things. It was like an internet circular. Send this to all your friends, or you know.
Was it really like addressed to you, like someone?
Oh yeah. No, they actually texted me and said, "Is this Peyton Jones of New Breed?" And they got the phone number from the public site. And no, in our audience, they'll start sending these now to be funny. But you know what was rad was I said, "Oh yeah, you know, yes it is, but who is this? Tell me who you are." You know, so I know you're not a scammer from halfway around the world. And they come back and they go, I am not a scammer. I am a servant of the Most High God. And exclamation marks and capitals and boom. And I was like, okay, all right. And so they sent me this weird message, and I just ate them for breakfast. I went into the whole, hey, look, you know, first off, your hocus pocus doesn't scare me, right? You don't, this is a rant of the flesh. Something made you angry. And, you know, I'd be careful saying it was God, because, you know, last time I checked, I told him I'm doing an in-depth study of Deuteronomy. God doesn't forbid anything like that. Number one. Number two, Paul, in his only fully recorded sermon in Acts, refers to pagan prophets and poets as an illustration and quotes them, not as an authority, but as a way of connecting with them. So, and I said, you know, look, I've spent years reaching people with pop culture because I lived as a missionary overseas reaching lost people, which is something I'm pretty convinced you don't do. In fact, I'm pretty sure your kids probably are afraid of anything you talk about and weirded out by you and probably think you're nuts. Because I've seen people like you over the years, and you destroy everyone around you for the gospel witness. And just, yeah, I let them have it, both barrels. Cause it was like, and I told them, I said, you know, so much of Pentecostal, and now understand, I have great love for Pentecostals and charismatics. But when I see the people that are what I would refer to as hyper Pentecostal and hyper charismatic, where normally what it is, it's an imbibing of Toltec wisdom, which is like a Native American shamanism. There's a book, if any of you guys ever want to read a book that will expose a lot of the current hyper-Pentecostal theology, much of it was borrowed from the shamanistic, I would say, quote, theology, shamanistic beliefs of Toltec medicine men. And there's a book that hit the bestseller list years ago called The Four Agreements. And so when you're like, where did all that stuff come from? Like you've made an agreement with an evil spirit and a contract and you got to break that. That's Toltec wisdom. And it's shamanism. So I actually flipped it back around and said, look, I may refer to 80s pop culture like Paul did on Athens, but you're actually imbibing shamanistic, ritualistic theology and trying to pass it off as the Bible. So when you want to talk about, someone being warned, I'm warning you because you're mixing paganism with Christianity. And so I just flipped it around.
What did he say?
They did not respond. I did do the whole thing where I said, hey, by the way, tell me your name. Tell me who you are. Because right now you're hiding in the shadows and taking cheap shots at me like a coward behind the shadow of darkness and anonymity. Only the devil does that. So I was like, you gotta have me. But it's weird, man. Like I've never gotten one of those before. So it was I've hit the next level, Pete.
Welcome to my world. I'm so proud of you.
Yep, you haven't gotten one of those crazy ones, have you?
Not via text. I've only got them via email.
Oh, man. And they were so like, I just thought these are the people I said, I'm going to lump you in the category of Hagen and Copeland and all those false teachers, because it was just kind of like people like you destroy the gullible. You destroy people. I've watched the false people connected with those false teaching movements just destroy. And I was angry. I mean, I just thought to myself, what would Paul do in this situation? And Paul wouldn't take that line.
What would Elisha do? He'd call down a she-bear.
Yeah, no kidding, right? That would be rad. I should have used that.
Was it Elisha or Elijah that did that? I can't remember now. I think it was Elisha.
It was Elisha.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, he was like, hey, new sheriff in town, right? He was, Elijah was.
Elisha was like, look, I ain't playing this game. She-bear, where are you?
Like, look, I know how you guys treat Elijah. You ain't poking fun of my bald head. Yeah, that just ain't going out. New sheriff in town there, buddy.
Dude, I saw this T-shirt. Maybe it was you. Someone sent it to me yesterday, and the T-shirt had a caption on it, and all it said was, "I'll be your Huckleberry." And I was like, "Oh, I love that."
I sent you the one that said, "Are you gonna do something? Or are you just gonna stand there and bleed?"
That's right. That was the one that you sent me. Are you gonna do something? You're just gonna stand there and bleed. And what's funny is millennials today
just had written all over it.
Millennials today have no idea what that's from. Like,
isn't that weird?
Yeah, because that was like one of the greatest movies of all time. And people
it's funny. My favorite Western, like ever, hands down. There's two. And they both have Kevin Costner in them, funny enough.
Really?
Open Range.
Dances with Wolves?
No. Open Range is one. Oh. I love that one.
I don't know that I've seen that, actually.
You would love that movie.
I don't know that I've seen it.
That's Open Range has Kevin Costner and Robert Duvall in it, the guy from Lonesome Dove. And
I know who Robert Duvall is.
What's that?
I know who Robert Duvall is, but I don't. Yeah. I don't think
our listeners, though. Remember, we do have young people listening.
Well, I think you're going to need to use a different reference for Robert Duvall than that.
Yeah, I couldn't say the Great Santini, though, right? Like, I don't know I don't know what Robert Duvall's been in recently. He has been in stuff.
He was in The Apostle, right? I mean, that's one that our listeners might recognize. Never saw it, but you know.
So you got to see Open Range. That's all of you have homework this week. You got to go see that.
I think I will, because I don't recognize the name. Maybe when I start to watch it, I'll recognize it, but I don't recognize it.
So, and you will love it. You'll love it just for like the last 30 minutes, but don't speed ahead because it's slow moving, like the old Westerns, kind of like how like you're watching Shane and at the end it's like bam, 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 you know, and you're building up to it, you know. I hate sodbusters, you know, that whole thing. And then at the end, psh, 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 you know, you ever killed the man, Shane? It's a slow burn, and then it just all blows up. You know, the powder keg blows. And Open Range is old school Western that way. It's why I love it. This is why I love these films. Second one to me is what is often called, and I think Open Range now has reopened the book, but Silverado used to be called the last of the great Westerns because it was made in the 80s. All-star cast, Danny Glover, Kevin Costner, Scott Glenn, Brian Dennehy, Kevin Kline, Linda Hunt, Jeff Goldblum. I mean, amazing film.
What's your favorite non-sci-fi movie.
Favorite non-sci-fi?
Yeah.
Well, give me a little bit more of a narrowing down. Are we talking like drama, action? Like, what are we talking?
Your dealer's choice,
Comedy.
man. Dealer's choice. Because when you said Brian Dennehy, my mind flashed to one of my favorite movies of all time.
Cocoon.
No, not
I
Cocoon.
knew it wasn't Cocoon. That was a joke.
First Blood. That's where my mind went when you said Brian
so
Dennehy.
good, dude.
Yeah.
So good. That is such a great, I prefer that movie to Rambo. Like,
Oh, yeah, totally.
Such
Totally.
good.
It's way better.
welcome
better.
to Smack Talk Church Planner. We do have the Honorable Clint Clifton coming on in a little bit. You don't get to hear him yet because that's how the podcast rolls right now. Clint may change all that, but that's how we roll until he does. Ooh, how about that for a teaser?
I like that. That was a good little rollover.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I'm sorry, when you said Brian Dennehy, that was immediately, I was like, one of my favorite movies of all time, First Blood.
Oh, and in the second one, I'm coming to get you. That was a good one. That was the best part of that.
I'm coming for you.
Wasn't the guy that he says that to, wasn't he the Cobra Kai instructor in Karate Kid?
No, he wasn't. No.
It's not the same dude? I thought
No.
Yeah, isn't it Rambo? That's the guy he says that to.
No.
The guy that plays
No.
Okay.
No. That movie's coming back. That movie's coming back. They're remaking one with Ralph Macchio.
Oh, I thought you were saying Rambo. I was like,
Well, I think they are making another Rambo, but no,
Rambo with Ralph Macchio.
No, that would be cool. No, another Karate Kid.
So they remade with Jaden Smith, and I gotta say, it was good, dude.
I didn't like it.
You didn't like it? I loved it.
No, because it's unrealistic. I don't like movies that are so unrealistic.
Dude, the Karate
Unlike
Kid
Star Wars, which is totally realistic.
Such a classic. I watched a documentary on the making of that this week, and it was, I guess, the guy that played Danny. Danny was the bad guy, right? The blonde-haired dude, or was it Danielson? I don't know. Danielson was Ralph Macchio, but dude, those two became best friends.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah, they're like lifelong best friends now. So, but dude, that movie was so good. Like, I went back and watched pieces of it this year because I'm grabbing quotes from my
Wasn't
my
Elizabeth
Ninja book.
Shue the girlfriend?
What's that?
Wasn't Elizabeth Shue the girlfriend?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that's her name. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Just a little side note. I was like, man, I haven't really seen Elizabeth Shue in much, but I think that's where she got her start.
Yeah, dude. So when they do the remake, is it like Ralph Macchio's going to play the old sage that
I
trained?
think so. Yeah, because he's got Miyagi-Do karate. They brought back everybody, like even the old Cobra Kai guy who you were thinking it was. Yeah, that's why I'm like, no, it's totally not. Because I don't remember the guy's name from Rambo, who played Murdoch, who was the.
Oh yeah, Murdoch. You're right. He wasn't Murdoch, but wasn't that guy in Rambo though? Didn't he have a
Oh,
role
was he in it? Yeah. I know what you're saying. Yes, he was in it. The Cobra Kai guy was in it. He just wasn't the leader.
You're right. Murdoch is it. Now that you said Murdoch, my mind went to his face. Yeah, he was in a ton of stuff.
No, you're totally right. The Cobra Kai guy was in Rambo, but was not the guy who Rambo was like, I'm coming for you, even though he came for the other guy.
Yeah, he's the guy that like kind of drops Rambo in the soup, right? And kind of screws him over.
Leaves him there. Yeah, when he called him in and he had a POW with him and he like calls off the helicopters and won't let him land.
So Rambo is one of my favorite movies. I don't know.
Rambo or First Blood? Because Rambo to me, I could.
I'm sorry, First Blood. I mean,
yeah.
First Blood. Like literally, First Blood. Like we had those knives from Rambo. We would as kids try to simulate when he's out in the woods and he's like doing all the traps. Like we couldn't do that stuff, but we would simulate it. We tried to do that kind of stuff. We'd set up little traps in the bushes and we'd try to like paint ourselves all black and put a bunch of dirt on our face and hide in mud piles. It was rad, dude.
I dig it, man.
That scene where he jumps out of the helicopter into the tree.
Oh, no. It wasn't out of the helicopter into the tree. You're talking about First Blood, right?
Off the cliff.
Off the cliff, yeah.
Oh, so good, dude. Yeah, because the helicopter's chasing him, and he's breaking all of his ribs. And, oh, dude, it's so good. He's getting stabbed, and then he sews himself up with the car seat.
He sews himself up with a car seat.
Remember?
Oh, yeah.
In a car, and he sews himself up with it. And you're like,
or how about when he's in the river, the freezing cold river, as the National Guard is walking by, and he's like hiding in the river.
Oh, dude, it's so good. And then the end of that movie, you know, where like he has his mental breakdown. And like the movie doesn't end like most action movies. Like that's what made that movie great. And I gotta say, Stallone, for to his credit, like he kind of became a bit of a laughing stock for probably people don't remember for about 10 years. Everybody just laughed at Stallone. But during that time, man, he was busting out Rockies, busting out in those movies like Rocky. Rocky doesn't win at the end, He just
in the first one, yeah,
he takes the hit the whole time. But just even that movie where it's like this, nobody was writing like him. Like where I'm not making.
Well, okay, when he wrote Rocky, he was broke, living in his car.
Yep. And
they offered him. First, it was like, we'll give you $30,000 for the script. And he's like, no, I got to star in it. And they went up to like $300,000. Here's a guy living in his car being offered $300,000 for the script without him in it. And he refuses to take it. He's like, no, you have to, I'm going to star in this movie. And that, because he just had the guts to be like, no, forget the money. I got to go for the dream. He is who he is today.
Absolutely. And similar to that was Arnold Schwarzenegger, who came over, was like doing all of his working out. And he was like, I got to break into Hollywood. And at that time, everybody was telling him, oh, nobody's going to hire you. Look at, there's no parts for you. You're like freaking Mr.
No one
Olympia.
can understand you.
No one can understand you, and nobody wants a muscle-bound freak like you. Like right now, it's like Dustin Hoffman. It's, Woody Allen. It's all these wimpy dudes. Even like the action films back then was like Charles Bronson with Death Wish. Like nobody wanted a dude that looked like Arnold. So Arnold's like, oh, well, anyways, what he started doing is he started I think it was like a cement business or something stupid like that. That he literally would get the job and he'd go buy the equipment, and that's how he started. He'd talk it up. Arnold's always been a talker. And what happened was he started investing in real estate. He started buying real estate. And he said what happened was I was able to negotiate way better for the stuff I did because I didn't need the money, and same kind of deal. I was able to hold out because all of a sudden, like unlike all these actors who were just desperate and they would get manipulated, he said, I made sure I had a financial base behind me, and I signed some really good contracts. And I can't remember which one was the contract. It was really surprising. They asked him it was Twins. So when he went into Twins, they said, we will front the studio wasn't going to put a bunch of money in. Arnold and Danny DeVito said, we'll invest in the money, but you got to give us 40%. And of course, it's a comedy. No one knew it was going to be the runaway hit it was. And he said, that's my most financially successful movie ever, was Twins, because I like the George Lucas deal. Hey, give me all the toys. Yeah, who cares? And Schwarzenegger says, you'll give Danny DeVito and I 40%, whatever the movie makes. And they said, yeah, no problem. You put all the money up, no problem. We don't think it's going to be that big of a hit. And he said next time he saw the producer, director, whoever it was, at the studio, the guy's like, you're robbing me. He's like turn his pockets out. Just take everything. You already are.
That's funny. Yeah. Well, I guess we should probably get into our topic.
We should. We've had enough fun for the day.
All right.
Great Scott! It's time for this week's topic.
Let's get down to the nitty-gritty.
Peyton, why don't you introduce our guest?
Well, I'd like to take podcast host for 500, Pete. And the question is, who is Clint Clifton?
Ooh, so that would be the Daily Double.
Yes, and Pete, I would like a lightning round of us kind of discussing who Clint Clifton is, as a church planner, as a church planning legend, as an international book selling author, and part-time party clown on the weekends.
And as much as I'd like that, I just have one thought going through my head right now.
I got a bad feeling about this.
So, hey, my guest today
what a great
is
way
a
to
friend.
introduce the guest.
What's that?
I said, what a great way to introduce the guest.
Hey, it's Church Planner podcast style, right?
That's
so,
it.
my guest today, this will be the first time you hear him on the podcast, but it definitely will not be the last. My guest today is Clint Clifton. He is a friend. He is a partner in gospel work. I served with Clint in the Send Network. He is currently serving as the Sin City missionary for DC and Baltimore. He's also he's church planted, started, I believe, he'll tell us more, but I think when he was like 17 or something, or I don't know, maybe 3, I can't remember, but very, very young. And he also wrote an incredible, he also, he works, he's on the board at, he doesn't work there, but he's on the board for McLean Bible Church. Some of you know that as a place where David Platt is currently serving. And not only that, but he did write a book. It is a fantastic book. Brad Briscoe throws it out there as one of the church planning books you must read, and it's called Church Planning Threshold. So Clint, man, welcome to the Madhouse.
Well, thank you, Peyton. That was quite an introduction.
It was special, wasn't it?
And thank
special.
you, Pete, for being here.
Yes, thank you, Pete, for being here.
All right. My ego needed a little stroke in there.
Yeah,
Don't
I'm
forget
sorry.
Pete, man. That's the rule.
Yeah.
That
Why
is
we don't
the
have
rule.
guests anymore.
You can never forget Pete. Don't forget Pete.
And agree with Pete as much as you can, because if you do, he will save the soundbite and he will replay it over and over.
That's right. I sure
You'll
will.
treasure it.
Awesome.
So, Clint, tell us a little bit about, one of the questions Pete and I always ask is how you came to faith.
Yeah. Well, I come from a family. I grew up in North Florida, and my mom got hurt when she was pregnant with me, and kind of series of bad surgeries and sort of stuff. She was handicapped, basically. Long story short. And my dad didn't take that so well, and so he started drinking, kind of womanizing, and their marriage fell apart. And so by the time I was 3 or 4 years old, I was living with my grandmother and my mom, who was having a bunch of health conditions, and my older sister. And I grew up in kind of that environment without a dad around. And then when I was I think I was like 6 years old, my mom remarried. She met a man and remarried, and they weren't walking with the Lord. But we got, at one point in our scenario, we had to move in with his mother. So our family of 5 moved in with, stepdad's mom, in this little town in Florida. And the next door neighbor there, was a Baptist preacher and shared the gospel with my mom and dad. They came to faith. And then a few years later, I came to faith as well. I was chasing a girl, and led me to church, and ultimately didn't catch her, but met Jesus when I. And the pastor at that church that I got involved in began to disciple me, and he was passionate about church planting, and so from my very first days of discipleship, he was teaching me that my life was to be used for starting new churches. And so I remember literally my first discipleship meeting, he was walking through a pastoral training book with me. And so I'm a brand new Christian, just less than a week a Christian. He's already trained me to be a pastor. And so I owe a great deal to him. His name's Danny Williams. He's a pastor in Georgia now, and been a great friend and mentor to me. So
that's pretty cool, man. I remember the same thing. The guy that led me to Christ took me to the Christian bookstore and handed me Spurgeon lectures to my students and Lloyd Jones' Sermon on the Mount.
Wow.
I said, you need to read both of them. Well, I asked him years later, guy was 21. I said, hey, how come he handed me those books? He goes, I have no idea.
There was no method to the madness. Well, yeah, looking back, it was a little crazy. I can't imagine a guy coming to faith in Christ right now, especially a teenager, and me meeting up with them for discipleship and deciding that the best resource I could use was it was actually a Henry Blackaby little book called Called and Accountable, and it's literally about, it walks through 1 Timothy 3, Titus, even Peter, qualities for elders and pastors. So,
but how cool is that though? That you end up, from the day you get saved, you're like, well, looks like I'm gonna serve Jesus. Like that's what this is all about. I think that's very first century, to be honest. That's very
Yeah, it was. It's a little ironic to be studying about not being a new convert, and then though in the qualifications, and then be a 17-year-old new convert, 15-year-old new convert.
That's rad.
So, yeah,
that's rad. There's still hope for Pete that he'll get saved. We're running to the end of this podcast on 6 years. It hasn't happened yet, but we're hoping, Clint, we bring you on that.
Man, sometimes you got to labor for many years before there's fruit. That's right.
That's right.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
So Pete, I want to ask Pete to share a little bit. Pete, kind of share where maybe talk about the funk, maybe talk about kind of why we got Clint here today and why we're getting to know him.
Well, Clint has dutifully paid his application fee and is applying to take over the Church Planter podcast. And
not a hostile takeover. Not a hostile takeover.
Well, guns were involved.
They're always involved with you. Even if no one else has guns, somewhere Pete's got a bunch of guns, and they're involved somehow.
Dude, you know what was funny is, I know, side note, but whatever, deal with it. So I had to go to Phoenix last week, and everyone's like, hey, why'd you drive out here? I'm like, because it's too hard to fly with a gun. So I drove. But anyway, total side note there.
Resist the smack. Resist the smack.
I can't resist it. No, so, we've shared with this on the podcast before that you and I have been trying to think of, what's the right move for us to make in our lives with the podcast, even, with the magazine. What's really been the right thing. And in the past, you and I have gone through different stages where, at one time you'll be like, what, I'm tired of doing this and it's time to move on. And then you'll get over that. And then later I'll be like, it's tired of this and, it's time to move on. And then it just, after doing this for 6 years, I think it both just kind of hit us at the same time of, maybe it's time for us to move on. Maybe it's time to bring in some new blood, somebody who's hopefully, I think that the goal is he's not going to talk about guns nearly as much as me on the Church Planter podcast. And so, yeah, I mean, we've just kind of been out there and being open, I think would be the right word, not necessarily searching, but just being open to, hey, is there someone who we think could run this thing and give it another 6 years and continue to help the church planters? And so, Peyton, you've known Clint and you said, hey, I think I know the right guy for this. And so that's kind of what brought us here today. And my first time actually in talking to Clint is today on this podcast. So he's still got to prove himself to me, but other than that, it's cool.
Well, Clint, you'll just have to tell Pete about all the miniguns you own.
What?
Afterwards. He lives in DC, so like no guns can be owned.
Yeah, no guns. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a gun guy. I don't have much to say about that. Sorry.
Well, I guess we can actually end this interview right here then.
I know.
If a year ago, 2 years ago, if you had had a Charger, Clint, you would have been gold.
Yeah, I actually do own a gun, but it was passed down to me from my father who passed away, and it's I don't know anything about guns, but I'm pretty sure this doesn't qualify to a real gun guy as a gun.
Oh
because
no, it does.
It's called a pocket pistol.
Oh,
and it's tiny.
Did
tiny.
you hear that?
Oh, dude,
approval, my friend.
Okay,
really?
I'm gonna be flying out to Washington D.C. I'm gonna take you to the local range wherever that is, and we're gonna give that thing a go.
I've never fired it.
Well, there's
one of the
always
reasons
time to
I
do
haven't
that.
fired it is because the ammo isn't easily accessible. It seems like it's a little bit. I've gone to some ammo stores and tried to get ammo, and they didn't have the right kind of ammo for it. So
we're in smack territory again, Pete.
The good news is, now this is important for all of our listeners to know. When you're in a free state, I mean, DC is not really free, but it's more free than California, ironically. You can actually order it online, which I can't do here in California. So, you know,
I might need to do that.
There you go.
So already we've corrupted.
You just made me a gun guy.
I know, dude. I'm going to take him to the range. Next thing you know, he's going to have the sombrero, the bandoliers. I mean, he's going to be good to go. He's going to be Yosemite Sam by the time I'm done with him.
Clint, you're supposed to convert Pete, man. It's not supposed to work the other way around. But you know, it's really funny because we'll talk about this in more detail in future when we're really close to the actual handoff, because we're gonna track together for a little bit. And here's the thing. Pete and I were just talking yesterday, and we're not in the funk anymore. But I think that prolonged period of just kind of seeking the Lord, you know, really kind of made us go, well, you know, this is the right thing. You know, like it's not even that. It's not even like we're in a funk, because when we both hit the funk at the same time, it was the first time in 6 years we're just questioning, like, is this what we're supposed to do? And like I said, we'll talk more about what that felt like, looked like, you know, this and that, and where we came out the other side. But it's funny, it's good for us that's not, like, we were laughing yesterday, like, hey man, we could still keep going, but we don't feel that's the right thing. So that's kind of where we're at. So I think it's going to be good, Clint, because I know who you are. I know your incredible knowledge of church planning that's practical and theological. Because I mean, you know, you're kind of a mix of both, a little bit like me. And I think finding a podcast host who is able to pull both off is not easy. Right. So tell me a little bit about, you know, your theological background.
Yeah.
And then your practical background. I'd like to hear both.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm a little bit of a theological hack, I think. I did go to Bible college and seminary, but I got music degrees in both, and so it doesn't really count. But I was discipled really well. I've always had a love for the Word, and I say always since I became a Christian, and I was discipled well. I was in a solid church that taught through the Scripture, and just have always really appreciated good Bible teaching and been drawn to that. And so I do consider myself like a student of Scripture and somebody who really desires to understand and apply God's Word right. So so I've got, on the theological spectrum, I've kind of swung pretty wide over the course of time that I've been a Christian. I started off very much in the purpose-driven vein, if we're thinking about like philosophy of ministry sort of stuff. The Guy Who Led Me to Christ appreciated Rick Warren and sort of that style of ministry, and then I went on to work in my first church plant. You mentioned when I was 17 years old, I helped start a church. I wasn't the lead planter, but I partnered. I was like a pastoral partner with a guy who started a church, and then we started churches around my hometown. And so I was involved in Bible teaching and preaching and kind of music leadership and church leadership from really early days after my conversion. And so, I was kind of in that vein for a little while and planted a church that was a little bit more purpose driven. And then I went and got involved in a church with a pastor that was Reformed, and he was a good pastor to me. Got familiarized with the Reformed community. I did an internship at CHBC, Capitol Hill Baptist Church in Washington, with Mark Dever. I was pastoring when I did that, but I was. They kind of called me the virtual intern. I went
not to be confused with Mark Dever, right?
No, Mark Dever and Mark Dever are very different people. Yeah. But anyway, I learned a lot from those guys, and kind of, as you can imagine, they call that the cage phase of Reformed theology, right? You know, I kind of went through a period of the cage phase and kind of got real hostile with all my church members and ticked a bunch of people off during that season of my life. And then I feel like now the pendulum has swung back, and I'm somewhere between those two things. I think the thing I appreciate about the Reformed community is their love for the local church and their love for the Word. And the thing I appreciate about the sort of seeker movement is their urgency to get the gospel to people who don't know Jesus. And so I find a value in both of those things and consider myself to be a blend of the two. Yeah.
Hey, I got a quick question for you here, just because I'm curious. What do you do for your living? Like, are you a full-time pastor, or do you have a side gig? What's your deal?
Peyton told you about my clowning.
Well, that's true. Yes.
Other than that, though,
than weddings and funerals, guys. That's all.
And funerals. Wow. No, I'm actually frightened of clowns, so I couldn't do that. But
considered years ago, he had Captain America come to his party, his kids' party, not Pete's party. That would be rad. But he had Captain America come to his kids' party, except it was like ripping hot in July, and the guy was wearing like the leather Captain America suit, and he was sweating like a pig.
Yeah.
But that could be a gig. That'd be kind of cool. Get to be the Avengers on the weekend. Anyway, I'll stop.
I just heard the train, and now I know why I heard the train. Because I was at your house the other day.
It's been my house.
Yeah, it wasn't made up. It really is a train.
There's a train track right next to his house.
I've literally had people ask me if it's a soundbite. I'm not even kidding.
It sounded like a soundbite. I thought Pete was pressing his button again. Yes. So I totally forgot what we were talking about.
Your job. What you do?
Yeah. What I do for a living. I work for the North American Mission Board full time, and my role with NAM is I'm the Send City missionary, which essentially means I'm kind of overseeing all things church planting for Washington D.C., the greatest city in the world, and Baltimore.
I was born there.
The second greatest city in the world. So, I do those things for the North American Mission Board, and the future of the podcast also just incidentally has NAM's involvement. NAM has very generously decided to be a sponsor on the podcast, and so they're going to come alongside and help with some of the production costs and be a part of.
From what I understand, NAM basically said Pete's not going to be involved anymore, right? Yeah, we can get behind the podcast now.
We're in.
I think
as long as Pete's out, we're in. Yes.
I think now that Peyton's out, we're in.
Yeah. So that's what I do. I work with NAM. I became a Christian in Southern Baptist Church, and of course, you may or may not know that NAM is a subsidiary of the SBC. It's related to the SBC, and so I feel a sense of loyalty to that. The churches that I plant are associated with the SBC, and I love that work. Of course, I see tons of value in the broader work and other networks as well. But it's the SBC stands for a set of values and theological ideas that I believe in. So that's the tribe I run with.
Nice. So you're what we would refer to as a professional missionary. I like it.
Professional Christian, I like. That's my preference.
Okay, I like that one too.
Rad.
That'd be awesome if they gave you like a little, almost like a driver's license. It said professional Christian with your picture. Expires. Well, it's got to have an expiry date, so that way you got to renew it. That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
We meet other standing joke that if you have one of those as a minister, it's most suspect. Right. Yes. The only place you get one of those is off the internet, and those are the guys you got to watch out for.
Yeah, but worse than that's that clergy bumper sticker. You seen that thing? Boy, that's fishy.
No, I want one of those so I can roll into hospitals.
But you can get that anywhere, man.
I got to park with all the other chumps when I'm doing the Lord's work.
Say?
What's up with that?
What is it? Just like this is a clergy?
Yeah, it's just like a bumper sticker that says clergy.
You need a little disc that you put on your dashboard so like people don't like key your car when you're not working, and then you can pretend you're like undercover, like you whip that out like a police where they put the siren on the magnetic siren. Pete, wouldn't it be rad to have one of those? Magnetic siren and just put it on the roof of your car and just speed.
The benefit of this podcast to our listeners never ceases to amaze. Like I'm Googling right now, and there's clergy bumper stickers that you can buy. This is awesome. Yeah.
Well, Pete got ordained on the internet.
I did.
We don't know why he did it. But
the Church of Celestial Light.
Wait, I'm trying to remember what it is. Man, it has light in the title. I know that there is light in the title.
I think Pete's rethinking his denomination these days. It's something to do with guns. I don't. It's his latest thing. When we started this podcast, Clint, I learned a lot about Pete because we were becoming friends, and I learned Pete will get fixated. Now, the gun thing, he will tell you is for life, but I swear to you, for a year straight, he was talking about the Charger almost every episode. He almost bought me a Charger. He was so excited about it. He wanted to live vicariously through me owning a Charger, another Charger. And but our first incarnation of this obsessive behavior on Pete's part was Underoos. The return to adult. That
was not my obsession. That was your obsession.
I thought I could get away with saying it was okay. It was early days. We were young and foolish. Don't judge me.
Please don't Google Underoos, guys.
Oh, but by the way, side note, you can get a Pope John Paul II bumper sticker as well. So,
I thought you were going to say Underoos just then.
No.
How is this becoming smack talk? I don't want to know about the Pope John Paul II Underoos. I don't want to know about those.
There's so many places I can go with that.
Save our podcast.
You constantly make me lose my train of thought, so I don't know what we're even talking about.
Okay,
but
so let's get back to the nitty gritty. Unless you had a thought.
No, I work at NAM. Was the answer to your question, Pete, or whoever asked it?
Let's get down to the nitty gritty.
All right, now we're back to the nitty gritty.
He answered that question satisfactorily, though.
He did. Yeah, he actually has a real job. He's a professional.
Unlike me when I started this podcast.
Unlike me ever. I don't have a real job. I make up my jobs.
So here's kind of the cool thing. One of the things I'd really like to know, and I love the fact that you're a hybrid, because that's how I am. I always tell people I'm like a Franken preacher. And I came out of the Jesus movement, went to Lloyd Jones's church. I mean, you do the math, right? I experienced miracles and supernatural stuff, which, even some of our people are like, whoa, pal, you can't be bringing the book of Acts in here. But honestly, for me, it's just like, okay, I'm a weird mix. My theology, though, is extremely conservative. So it's very old school. Yeah. And so for me, I am still to this day, I feel like when it comes to theological issues, I've still got a knife in my teeth. It's like commando, dude, you're never going to, whenever I see people kind of turn liberal, I'm always like, that's cool. Cause I know you think you're going to reach lost people and you think you're going to help God out by going liberal and being more reasonable and yada, whatever you want to fill the blank in. But I've lived in Europe where they went through that on not just on an individual basis, but the whole continent did that. And they're lost. I mean, they're gone. Always to me, and even now in Europe, it's really interesting because when they do the survey, they say that they'll do these polls and they'll say still to this day, the evangelical churches are seeing conversions where the liberal churches don't. They're just in a constant. In the fastest growing churches, the churches that are surviving, that are thriving, they're always going to be evangelical churches. You're never going to find a liberal church thriving in Europe. And so for me, it's always kind of like this, my love for lost people. I almost see it as, I'm going through Deuteronomy and I see this, it's such a betrayal where Moses is saying to the people, don't do this. Don't deviate. Don't go this way. You're going to get in there. You're going to think, oh, this sounds so good. They're saying, and God's going, no. And Moses is telling them, don't do it. When you get over there, don't do it. And it's this giant book, 40 chapters of let me just remind you, it looks good. It sounds good. Don't do it. And I just see the church in the same spot today. And so even though I'm this weird hybrid, it's this commitment to scripture. And that's one of the refreshing things about you. I know you want to comment on that, so I'm going to hold my question until you respond.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I feel like we are really similar in those regards. I think we feel a sense of camaraderie when we talk to each other about our backgrounds because we do have a passion to see people come to know Jesus and want to be as relevant as possible. But at the end of the day, we're kind of theological fuddy-duddies at heart, and we want we're really conservative theologically, and sometimes even in our practice. Yeah. You were telling me the other day when we were talking that you really appreciate good liturgy, which
like before,
which is out of step with what you would guess about Peyton Jones.
Yeah, dude. Like every once in a while, I'll sneak into an Anglican or Episcopal church, and I'll worship to that high stuff. I could easily, if not for some of the theology, head into a Greek Orthodox church and be like, dude, I'm at home. That high liturgical worship to me it's what I like. I mean, there'll be times, it's funny because that's how I learned to worship. When I got saved, I went to an Episcopal church because it's the easiest church I could get. They were liberal as all get out, but the actual liturgy was rad. It was gospel filled. It was taking communion every Sunday. It was like readings of scripture, and I was like, "This is awesome. I love this." And so over the years, as I've and I thrived under that, because one of the things I love about liturgy is that it's not. And you and I have served in the Southern Baptist, so it's not like we're advocating now the podcast will be all about liturgy. It always shocks people, and I think why plant church is not for me. So I don't plant the church necessarily that I want to go to or worship in. I plant churches that are going to bridge the gap for unbelievers and yet still be packed with the gospel. Right. So like in the next church I plant, there'll be communion every Sunday, because that's just, I would have that at every home study. But going back to what I was saying is that, what I love about the liturgy is that the more liturgical you are, the less personality based your congregation becomes. And I think everybody's had enough of personality, I was telling my sending pastor, I talked to him 2 days ago, and he was going, "Do you preach much?" And I said, "Not in between church plants, no." But I said, I miss it. I go, it's funny when you church plant and you're training and multiplying, you get over wanting to be Jesus. But when, you do still want to talk about him sometimes.
Right.
He started laughing. He goes, "That's a good way to put it." So, yeah. But one of my questions for you is kind of along this line is what is the, who are like your favorite preachers? And what are some of your favorite books? Because I really want to get kind of a snapshot of who is Clint Clifton and what shaped him and, that kind of deal.
Yeah. Favorite books. I don't know if I have favorites, but I have things I recommend a lot and use a lot. One of those would be The Christian Ministry by Charles Bridges. He's a Puritan guy. Fantastic.
That's a great book. I love it. Yeah.
It's super dense, and I'm not that smart.
Pete's going to sleep. Pete's going to sleep here. I'm just telling you.
Yeah, but it's written to the pastor. It's from a Puritan pastor to a pastor that appreciates good theology, and so I've been so helped by that book. It's one of those books that I have to read every page like 3 or 4 times before I start to touch the tip of the iceberg or the meaning of what he's saying.
He's dense. Have you ever read
dense? Yeah.
Have you ever read him on Proverbs?
I don't recall that.
Get his book on Proverbs, which is an absolute gold mine. More of the same.
Yeah. So Christian Ministry is probably my favorite go-to book to recommend to pastors and church planters, just in such unique ideas. I'm a massive Spurgeon fan. Anything that he has produced, I love. I just read Steal Away Home, the book about, it's kind of a novel related to Spurgeon's life and his friendship that he had. And it was a fantastic book. It was, as a guy who really likes Spurgeon's work, it was fun to read a novel about him. And, that's some of kind of what I'm drawn to. Is that enough?
No, that's good, man. Who are your favorite preachers, like living?
Oh yeah, living preachers.
Okay, enough of the dead guys. Let's talk about the living guys.
Yeah, so I have had the privilege over the last 2 years to work.
And before you answer that, Cliff, understand Peyton is fishing for you to say, Reaching the Unreached, Church Zero, and Peyton Jones. So
that's not fair. That's not fair because Clint's never heard me preach. See, most people have never heard me preach.
I don't think that really matters to you.
That's not a fair question. I assume that had Clint heard me preach, the name would drop big time. But
big time.
Big time.
Well, I don't think I have heard you preach, Peyton, but I have.
Nobody's heard me.
I have read your work, and you're a pretty sharp dude. But to answer your question, I was going to say over the last couple of years, I've had the privilege of working more closely with David Platt here in Washington D.C. And
he can preach. No,
well, so with a lot of over the last little bit, getting to know people who are in higher profile pastoral positions and stuff like that. I don't know. Sometimes you're a little bit disappointed after you get to know him. You're like, oh man, this guy's not quite what he seemed like he was. And David's definitely not that. He's a fantastic Christian, and I've been really challenged by him personally, and encouraged, strengthened, and I love his preaching. I don't think there's a preacher I'd rather listen to than David. Every time I listen,
saying a lot that you know him, dude.
Yeah. No, I fully expected to get to know him and kind of be disappointed, as I am almost always when I get to know people.
like me last week.
Exactly. I was like, man, this Peyton Jones is not all he's cracked up to be. But yeah, David's ministry here has been good, and I've been consuming his preaching. I find myself going and listening to it just because I want to hear what he has to say, and consistently, I think he's one of the best preachers of our generation, and really gifted, and just thankful for him, and especially thankful for the way in which God has wired him, not just to be a good communicator, but to specifically use his life for mobilizing people to get out there and spread the gospel and start churches and reach the unreached. And it's so cool. Yeah. So, I mean, super thankful for him. Of course, I could name the kind of regular characters. I maybe an out of the way one that I like a lot and find myself most weeks listening to consistently for 10 years or something is Dennis McCullum over at Xenos Christian Fellowship in Columbus, Ohio. He's a guy that's like theologically not exactly where I'm at, but such a great Bible teacher. And absolutely love his work, Dennis McCullum. Yeah,
that's cool, man. And just thinking about David Platt, just you can't fake that passion. Like, when I hear that dude preach, I mean, his heart's breaking. He's passionate. You get the sense, and I think Francis Chan is this way too, where you get the sense that this dude is before the face of God right now, kind of that Robert Murray machine. Kind of deal that you can't fake that. You can't fake holiness. I can't remember. I think it was Leonard Ravenhill who said that's the one thing Satan can't fake. He can fake like the miracles of Pharaoh's magicians. He can fake miracles. He could fake everything, but he can't fake holiness.
Yeah,
true holiness. So, but hey, man, I appreciate. Wait. Oh yeah, go ahead.
One question that I've got, since we're almost out of time, and I think this is a really important question to find out. Because of the history of this podcast, we need to know who your favorite Star Wars character is.
Don't go there. I warned you.
Let's see. I gotta think if I even know one Star Wars character.
What?
That will be the one that says my favorite.
What?
Could we maybe talk Fraggle Rock instead?
It's our head exploding, Clint.
Yeah. I was the biggest hang up to me taking over the podcast was I know zero cultural references. So
no, but you do know a lot of rock and roll and classic rock and
I do.
In fairness, but that was a setup. Just you won't get this reference at all. But Pete shot first there. Pete shot first.
You won't get that.
Yeah. Sorry for all you Star Wars
Pete
fans.
Always shoots first. Let's be clear.
That is a Star Wars innuendo or reference, for lack of a better term.
And that's why in Solo he shot first at the end.
It is, but now you ruin the end for Clint for a film he'll never see.
You know what?
You didn't ruin it.
Whatever.
I said you didn't ruin it. It's fine.
All these great men that I've served with. It's funny, man, because like Macaulay, in my first interview with him, he goes, I've never seen a Star, because I asked him that question in my interview. He goes, you got any questions for me at the end of my interview? And I go, yeah, what's your favorite Star Wars film? And he started laughing. He goes, I've never seen a Star Wars movie. And I got up and walked away from the table and said, I can't work for you anymore, man. That's it. This interview's over. And and then came and sat back down and got a job. But but anyways, hey guys, our guest today has been Clint Clifton. Clint, where can people connect with you outside of this podcast?
Well, I'm on social media at Clint J. Clifton on Twitter. I'm on Facebook as well. Twitter's kind of my main go-to. And yeah, that's it. You can find more about my work here in Washington at nam.net/DC or /Baltimore. And I'm happy to connect with you. You can send me an email at dc@nam.net, dc@nam.net. So,
all right. Well, Clint, thanks for coming on, man. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Look forward to many cool podcasts in the future.
Yeah, me too.
Peyton, you want to sign us out?
All right. Well, guys, thanks for listening to the Church Planter Podcast. And Arnold? No, wait. Wrong
podcast.
This is why we can't have nice things when we need Clint. Thanks for listening to the Church Planter Podcast. This has been Peyton Jones, Pete Mitchell, and Clint Clifton reminding you, if you want to reach the people no one's reaching, you need to go where nobody's going and do what nobody's doing.
Thanks for joining us for another weekly episode of the Church Planter Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones. We'd love to hear your comments on this episode of the Church Planter Podcast. Visit us online and let us know what you thought at churchplanterpodcast.com. If you subscribe to us via iTunes and have enjoyed the podcast, leave us a positive review. The more positive reviews we receive in iTunes, the more iTunes will promote us to other church planners who would benefit from this show. This podcast is brought to you by the Church Planter Magazine, which is available in the iTunes newsstand or online via churchplantermagazine.com.